On the very day she was supposed to say "I do," Aiza's entire world came crashing down. In front of family, friends, and hundreds of guests, the man she was about to marry ran away with her own cousin. But instead of breaking down, she made a decision that shocked everyone in the room. She walked straight to a man in a wheelchair and asked him to marry her. What nobody knew was that this quiet, forgotten man was actually hiding a secret worth billions. Aiza sat in the bridal room, dressed in white, waiting for the happiest moment of her life. The guests were already seated. The musicians were ready. The hall was glowing with lights and flowers. But one thing was wrong. The groom was missing. At first, everyone thought he was simply late. But as the minutes passed, Aiza's heart began to pound with fear. Then her cousin Hina rushed into the room, her face pale and uneasy. "Aiza, don't go outside yet." Aiza stood up immediately. "What do you mean? Where is Samir?" Hina looked away. That was all Aiza needed to know. Without waiting for another word, she lifted her dress and ran out of the bridal room, through the hallway, toward the private guest suites upstairs. And then she saw them. Samir, her groom, standing hand in hand with Hina. Aiza froze. Her lips trembled. "Samir, what is this?" Samir exhaled like he was tired of pretending. "I can't marry you, Aiza. I'm in love with Hina." Those words hit harder than a slap. Her body went cold. Her eyes filled with tears. But the pain became even worse when Hina stepped closer and said softly, "I didn't mean for it to happen like this." Aiza stared at both of them in disbelief. The two people she trusted most had destroyed her in a single moment. News spread fast. Within minutes, the wedding hall was in chaos. Guests whispered. Some stood on chairs trying to see what was happening. Others pretended to be concerned while secretly enjoying the scandal. But the deepest wound came from Aiza's own family. Instead of defending her, they blamed her. Her aunt pointed at her and shouted, "Do you see the shame you've brought on this family?" Aiza turned in disbelief. "I brought shame? He cheated on me!" But nobody wanted truth. They wanted someone to blame. Hina stood behind Samir, pretending to cry, while Aiza stood alone in her wedding dress, feeling the weight of 100 judgmental eyes. She looked around the hall and realized something terrifying. Not one person was truly on her side. That was the moment something changed inside her. The tears were still there. The pain was still real. But beneath it all, something stronger had begun to rise. Resolve. Outside the wedding hall, near the entrance stairs, a man sat quietly in a wheelchair. His name was Rayyan. He had attended the ceremony as a distant business associate of one of the guests, but he kept to himself and spoke to no one. Aiza walked toward him, still in her wedding gown, still shaking from betrayal. She stopped in front of him. "What is your name?" He looked up calmly. "Rayyan." Aiza swallowed hard. Then she asked the one question nobody expected. "Will you marry me?" The world seemed to stop. Rayyan stared at her, searching her face for doubt, madness, or regret. "You don't know me," he said quietly. Aiza's voice cracked, but her eyes were steady. The man I thought I knew just destroyed my life. At least, when I look at you, I don't see cruelty." A crowd began to gather. Guests pulled out their phones. Some laughed, certain she had lost her mind. Rayanne looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "If this is truly your decision, then yes, I will marry you." Gasps spread through the crowd. And on the same day she had been betrayed, mocked, and abandoned, Aiza married a stranger in a wheelchair. Rayanne did not take her to a mansion. He took her to a modest apartment. It was neat, quiet, and simple. No luxury, no servants, no signs of wealth. That night, Aiza sat at the edge of the bed, still overwhelmed by everything that had happened. Rayanne broke the silence first. "I need to be honest with you," he said. "I have no interest in pretending to be someone I'm not. I was in an accident years ago. I lost the use of my legs. Since then, most people stopped seeing me as a man." Aiza lowered her eyes. "Today," she said softly, "I learned what it feels like to stop being seen as a person, too." That was the first moment they truly understood each other. Not through romance, not through promises, but through pain. Aiza soon noticed that Rayanne barely slept at night. Whenever the house was quiet, she could hear him breathing through pain, hiding it as if suffering had become part of his routine. The next morning, without telling him, she went to a clinic. She met a physical therapist and said, "I want to learn how to help my husband." The therapist looked surprised. "How long have you been married?" Aiza gave a small, sad smile. 2 days." The therapist stared at her for a moment, then began to teach her. That night, Aiza gently massaged Rayanne's legs, adjusted his posture, and helped him through the exercises she had learned. Rayanne watched her in silence. "Why are you doing this?" he finally asked. Aiza answered without looking up. "Because pain feels lighter when someone chooses to carry part of it with you." For the first time in years, Rayanne had no words. And for the first time since her wedding day, Aiza felt like her life had not ended. Maybe it had simply changed direction. But Aiza had no idea who Rayanne really was. Late one night, after she had fallen asleep, Rayanne wheeled himself toward the balcony and made a call. His voice was cold, controlled, powerful. "Cancel every contract linked to the Mallet Group. Freeze the transfers, and make sure no one traces this back to me." A voice on the other end replied immediately, "Yes, sir." Rayanne ended the call and looked out at the city lights below. This was no ordinary man. This was a man who had been hidden. A man erased by his own family after a suspicious accident. A man the world believed was broken. But in truth, Rayanne was the unseen owner of a vast business empire. One that could ruin the same people who had humiliated Aiza. The next morning, news spread that Samir's family business was collapsing. Investors had pulled out. Contracts had vanished. Accounts were under pressure. Panic swept through their household. And still, Aiza knew nothing. A few days later, Samir and Hina showed up at Aiza's new home. This time, they did not come with pride. They came with desperation. Samir tried to smile. "Aiza, maybe we were too hasty. We can still fix this." Aiza laughed in disbelief. "Fix this? You humiliated me in front of everyone." Hina stepped forward. "You don't belong here. Look at this place. Look at him. You only married him because you were angry." Before Aiza could reply, Rayan rolled forward calmly. "And what exactly is wrong with me?" he asked. Hina crossed her arms. "Nothing. If she wants to waste her life taking care of a man who can't even stand." The room fell silent. Aiza's face hardened. She walked up to Hina and said, "The man you mock has shown me more dignity in days than either of you showed me in years." Samir clenched his jaw. "You'll regret this." Rayan smiled faintly. "No," he said. "You will." A week later, the city's biggest business gala took place. Samir's family attended, hoping to save their collapsing reputation by meeting investors. Hina wore designer clothes. Samir pretended everything was under control. Then the host stepped onto the stage and made an announcement. "Tonight, we welcome the true chairman of Ardent Holdings, the man who has remained hidden from the public for years." The room went silent. Spotlights turned toward the entrance, and there he was, Rayan. In a tailored black suit, seated in his wheelchair, calm and commanding, as if the room itself belonged to him. Because it did. Shock spread across the hall. Samir's face turned pale. Hina nearly dropped her glass. Aiza stood frozen, unable to believe what she was seeing. The host continued. After surviving an attempted murder disguised as an accident, he chose to remain out of public view while rebuilding the empire in silence. Tonight, he returns. The crowd erupted. People rushed toward Rayan. Investors greeted him. Executives bowed respectfully. The same man they would have ignored days ago was now the most powerful man in the room. Rayan looked straight at Samir and Hina. Then he said into the microphone, "Some people only respect power. That is why they fail to recognize character when it stands in front of them." Samir lowered his eyes. Hina could not speak. And Aiza finally understood why fate had brought her to this man. Later that night, Aiza stood alone on the balcony, still trying to process everything. Rayan joined her. "You should have told me," she said softly. "I wanted you to know me before my name," he replied. "Before my money. Before my power." Aiza looked at him, her eyes full of emotion. "And if I had walked away?" Rayan smiled sadly. "Then at least I would have known that the only real thing I had felt in years was you." Aiza's eyes filled with tears. For the first time, they were not tears of humiliation. They were tears of healing. She stepped closer, placed her hand over his, and whispered, "They abandoned me in front of the world, but you gave me back my worth." Rayan held her hand tightly. And in that moment, both of them realized the truth. Sometimes the life that shatters in front of you is the very life that makes room for the one you were always meant to have. They mocked her for marrying a disabled man. They called it the biggest mistake of her life. But in the end, the man they looked down on became the reason everyone else bowed their heads.